Right now, the airspace over the Middle East is fracturing. In the last 24 hours alone, a relentless swarm of nearly 600 kinetic projectiles and loitering munitions has completely saturated the northern defense grid of Israel. Radar tracking centers are blinking red, pushed to the absolute mathematical limit of their computational capacity. This is not a random harassment barrage. This is a highly calculated multi-vector war game designed to force a catastrophic, system-wide failure of the Iron Dome. But while the skies over the Galilee burn, a far more terrifying strategic maneuver is unfolding in the shadows. The United States Central Command has just crossed a massive, irreversible red line. They didn't send disposable surveillance drones. They didn't rely on surgical, low-yield stealth fighters. Intercepted flight telemetry confirms that the Pentagon has authorized the deployment of the B-52 Stratofortress, the undisputed titan of strategic payload delivery. Launching not from local Allied bases, but executing grueling overland missions directly from the United Kingdom, these behemoths have breached deep into Iranian domestic airspace under the banner of Operation Epic Fury. Over 11,000 targets have been subjected to kinetic strikes in the last 30 days alone. If you listen to the official press briefings coming out of Washington and Allied defense ministries, you will hear a carefully rehearsed clinical narrative. Politicians and high-ranking officials are broadcasting continuous assurances that diplomatic off-ramps are functioning, that the risk of a broader conflict is contained, and that the operational theater is firmly under control. The raw, unfiltered open-source intelligence confirms a chillingly different reality. When the Pentagon is forced to deploy its ultimate strategic deterrent to execute kinetic strikes on subterranean command nodes inside Iran, all while the IDF's most elite armored spearhead faces catastrophic armor degradation in the valleys of southern Lebanon, that is not crisis management. That is a textbook spiral escalation. The superpower safety nets have failed. We are witnessing an asymmetric engagement where billion-dollar defense architectures are being systematically neutralized. In this briefing, we will deconstruct the staggering tactical breaches occurring right now, analyze the structural collapse of Iran's deep operational nodes, and expose the terrifying intelligence blind spot regarding Iran's nuclear core that could permanently shift the global balance of power in the exact next 48 hours. To understand why the B-52s are currently tearing through Iranian airspace, you have to look down at the dirt in southern Lebanon. You have to look at what military insiders are quietly calling the steel graveyard. For decades, the Israeli Merkava Mark IV has been marketed as the ultimate apex predator of armored warfare. It is a 65-ton fortress engineered with the engine in the front to maximize crew survivability. It is widely considered the gold standard of modern battle tanks. But over the last several weeks, open-source intelligence and leaked combat footage have absolutely shattered that myth of invincibility. Since early March, a confirmed minimum of 73 Merkava tanks have been completely neutralized, taken off the board. And the most chilling data point? 21 of those $6 million war machines were systematically dismantled in a single, brutal 24-hour window. Let that sink in. 21 advanced main battle tanks erased in a single day. How does a militia group utterly dismantle one of the most technologically advanced armored forces on the planet? This is the dark art of asymmetric engagement. The Radwan forces aren't fighting a conventional war. They are executing a masterclass in tactical exploitation. They know that the Merkava is protected by the Trophy Active Protection System, a hyper-advanced radar-guided shield designed to intercept incoming projectiles. So, they simply don't attack the shield. Instead, they lure these massive armored columns deep into the tight, restrictive, and mountainous valleys of southern Lebanon. They wait patiently inside a deeply fortified subterranean tunnel network. As the tanks advance into the kill zone, they trigger massive, deep-buried, improvised explosive devices. These blasts aren't necessarily meant to pierce the hull. They are meant to blow the tracks and shatter the suspension grid. The moment the Merkava is immobilized, it becomes a static target. This is where the lethal payload delivery begins. With the tank trapped, they launch a coordinated swarm of first-person view drones strapped with heavy armor-piercing explosives. Every time one of these drones, pieced together for maybe $2,000, takes flight, it is hunting a $6 million prize. These drones do not approach from the sides where the trophy radar is looking. They execute a vertical dive directly onto the top of the turret and the engine deck, the absolute thinnest armor on the entire vehicle. The trophy system was built for a previous era of warfare. It was designed to shoot down horizontal threats like traditional anti-tank guided missiles. It was never programmed to calculate and intercept a synchronized, vertical swarm of suicide drones dropping out of the clouds. It is a catastrophic structural collapse from above. The multi-million-dollar defense grid is rendered completely blind and useless. But here is the most dangerous intelligence blind spot: the detail that the official spokespeople absolutely refuse to address on camera. The military establishment is actively suppressing the true scale of this catastrophic armor degradation to protect domestic morale. When censors refuse to release the exact figures of their mechanized losses, that is a glaring red flag. That is the anatomy of a cover-up. You cannot hide physics, and you cannot hide battlefield math. By taking the heavy tanks off the board, the opposing forces are forcing Israeli infantry to dismount. They are forcing foot soldiers to leave the protection of heavy armor and advance exposed into hostile, violently booby-trapped terrain. This is a deliberate meat grinder strategy. The goal isn't just to destroy metal, it is to inflict a level of personnel casualties that becomes politically unsustainable. The spearhead of the military is bleeding out, bogged down in an unwinnable war of attrition, and their ground invasion strategy is on the verge of total paralysis. Now let us pull our eyes away from the mud and the burning armor in the valleys and look back up at the sky. Because the tactical collapse on the ground is intimately connected to the fracturing of the airspace above. When you see footage of 500 to 600 rockets streaking across the night sky, mainstream commentators will tell you this is just standard psychological pressure. They are absolutely wrong. This is a highly calculated mathematical assault on the computational bandwidth of the Iron Dome. The strategy is known as a saturation tactic. The opposing forces are not necessarily trying to hit specific infrastructure right now. They are trying to overwhelm the artificial intelligence. They are forcing the radar algorithms to track, calculate, and engage more overlapping targets simultaneously than the system was physically built to handle. Imagine being a radar operator inside one of those centralized command bunkers. Your screens are completely flooded with hostile vectors, the alarms are deafening, and you are watching the defense grid stretch to the point of total structural failure. And the adversaries are executing this using a doctrine called rapid mobile launch. They roll out modified, camouflaged transport vehicles, ripple-fire a massive barrage of unguided kinetic projectiles, and vanish back into their subterranean networks before the counter-battery radar can even lock onto their exact coordinates. It is a phantom barrage, systematically draining the defense grid one salvo at a time. But the true nightmare scenario here is not just computational, it is purely financial. It is the ruthless, asymmetric math of modern warfare. Consider the visceral disparity of this exchange. A standard unguided Grad rocket fired by Hezbollah costs roughly $300 to manufacture and deploy. To stop that $300 threat, the Iron Dome system must fire a Tamir interceptor. A single Tamir missile costs between $20,000 and $100,000. Standard military protocol dictates firing 2 interceptors per incoming target to ensure a confirmed kill. That is an expenditure of up to $200,000 to eliminate a $300 piece of welded steel. Now multiply that by 600. In a single day, the defensive apparatus burned through tens of millions of dollars just to keep the airspace intact for the afternoon. This is a war of economic attrition disguised as a tactical defense. Which brings us to the most heavily guarded state secret in the entire theater of operations right now: the actual inventory of the interceptor stockpile. The official line fed to the press is that the defense grids are fully stocked, robust, and operational. But the cold, hard reality of global logistics tells a completely different story. Manufacturing a high-tech interceptor takes significant time, incredibly specialized microchip components, and massive funding. You cannot just print them overnight in a factory. If this spiral escalation continues at the current daily burn rate, there is a strict mathematical certainty that the active defense networks will simply run out of ammunition. It is not a question of if, but when. And the very moment that system blinks red and shuts down due to magazine depletion, the skies over the most contested airspace on Earth will be completely, entirely wide open. This brings us to the exact reason why the United States Central Command panicked. When you look at the catastrophic armor degradation of the Merkava tanks in the mud of Lebanon, and you look at the mathematical exhaustion of the Iron Dome interceptors in the sky, you realize a terrifying strategic truth. The Allied spearhead is breaking. The ground forces are paralyzed, and the air defense grid is on the verge of total depletion. And that is exactly why the Pentagon bypassed all standard diplomatic protocols and ordered the B-52 Stratofortress fleet into the air. They did not launch these bombers from nearby heavily defended Allied airstrips in the Middle East. That would have been entirely too vulnerable to a preemptive counterstrike. Instead, they launched them from Royal Air Force Fairford in the United Kingdom. This means these crews flew grueling, multi-hour overland missions across continents, coordinating massive mid-air refueling operations in complete radio silence, just to reach the strike zone. You do not authorize that kind of logistical nightmare unless the operational target is of absolute existential importance. And the target is the root of this entire multi-vector war game. The military planners in Washington know perfectly well that you cannot stop the bleeding in Lebanon by fighting tunnel by tunnel. The cost in human personnel and multi-million-dollar hardware is mathematically impossible to sustain. You have to sever the head of the octopus to neutralize the tentacles. The B-52s were sent deep into Iranian domestic airspace to completely dismantle the subterranean supply chain that is feeding the exact drones and rockets currently dismantling the Israeli front lines. Let us talk about the hardware, because the specific tool chosen for this job tells you everything you need to know about the reality on the ground. The B-52 is not a stealth fighter. It is a massive, radar-reflecting titan from the Cold War era. It is slow, it is deafeningly loud, and it is entirely visible to early warning systems. But it possesses one unique, terrifying capability that no other aircraft in the Allied arsenal can replicate. It has an unmatched brute force capacity for strategic payload delivery. Specifically, it can carry the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator. Think about the sheer physics of what is happening right now. This is not a standard explosive. This is a 30,000-pound bunker buster. It is a precision-guided kinetic sledgehammer designed to do exactly one thing. It plummets from the stratosphere, buries itself up to 200 feet through solid reinforced concrete and mountain granite, and detonates deep underground. The goal is not to create a surface explosion. The goal is to trigger a massive, unrecoverable structural collapse of deep operational nodes. Over the last 30 days, under the classified banner of Operation Epic Fury, these bombers have systematically hunted down over 11,000 designated targets, focusing heavily on the most fortified underground command centers of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. We are talking about complexes buried inside solid mountains, facilities that were previously classified as completely immune to conventional airstrikes. But when a B-52 delivers that specific payload, the seismic shockwave physically liquefies the subterranean architecture. The radar grids, the drone assembly lines, the ballistic missile launch tubes, they are instantly subjected to a catastrophic tactical breach. They are systematically neutralized. The command structure inside is permanently taken off the board. This is why the superpower safety nets have completely failed. The United States is not just posturing. They are actively engaged in a theater-level kinetic campaign to physically erase the logistical backbone of a sovereign adversary, simply because it is the only remaining mathematical option to save their closest ally from a total tactical collapse. But by crossing this threshold, by dropping bunker busters into deep mountain ranges, they have triggered a countdown clock to a scenario that the intelligence community is absolutely terrified to discuss. We are now standing at the exact point of convergence. The burning armor in the valleys of southern Lebanon and the shattered mountain bunkers in Iran are no longer separate battlefields. They are one single unified theater of escalation. The desperate gamble of the Pentagon is clear. Deploy the B-52s to sever the head of the octopus before the Israeli armored spearhead completely bleeds out. But here is the terrifying reality that no one in Washington wants to admit. It might already be too late. The most dangerous intelligence blind spot on the planet right now is not about tanks, and it is not about drones. It is about the absolute darkest, most heavily fortified sectors of the Zagros Mountains. I am talking about the nuclear cores at Fordow and Natanz. For weeks, the Pentagon has flatly refused to confirm or deny whether the B-52s dropped massive ordnance penetrators on these specific nuclear sites. This is not a standard operational secret. This is a glaring, terrifying intelligence void. Why the absolute silence? There are only two mathematical possibilities, and both of them lead straight into a global nightmare. Possibility 1. The kinetic strikes actually breached the subterranean containment chambers, and a massive, uncontainable radiological event is currently unfolding deep underground, completely hidden from international monitoring systems. Possibility 2, and this is the scenario that is keeping the defense establishment awake right now. The bunker busters failed to penetrate the absolute deepest layers. They caused a structural collapse of the outer defenses but left the inner sanctum intact. And in response to this existential threat, the command structure in Tehran has made the final, irreversible decision. They are no longer just enriching uranium. They are actively bolting a live nuclear payload onto a ballistic missile to launch a catastrophic retaliation against the Allied bases across the Persian Gulf. We are not looking at months or weeks of diplomacy anymore. We are looking at a 48-hour countdown. The moment that first satellite detects the thermal bloom of a nuclear-armed ballistic launch, the entire global defense architecture will permanently fracture. The situation on the ground is deteriorating by the minute. If you want to understand exactly where the next kinetic strike is going to land before it happens, you need to stay locked into this channel. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and brace yourselves, because the real escalation has not even started yet. I will see you in the next briefing.